Just really quick about WSDA Regional Markets. So we work to support the economic viability of small and direct marketing farms and increasing the availability of Washington-grown products to schools and other consumers across the state. You might be familiar with our Small Farm Direct Marketing Program. You can get the new 2019 handbook, the Green Book, at our table today and tomorrow. And then we do some Bridging the Gaps food safety education and, of course, Farm to School. The ways we do that, we work on market development, growing demand and support for buyers to use more locally grown and Washington-grown foods. Lots of resources and publication, a lot of outreach and education like we are here today. Technical assistance, so available to call me up and ask questions about how to get started with Farm to School or how to expand. And then we do a lot of partnerships and promotions. So, for example, Taste Washington Day is one of our Farm to School promotions where school districts all across the state sign up to serve local products, do a Washington Apple Crunch like Grandview kind of leads the way in the biggest apple crunch in the state. And that's the first Wednesday in October, which is a really fun and one-off way to especially get started with Farm to School. So the ARC, obviously, like I said, the times are a little out of whack, but I'm going to cover some kind of farm to school and school market basics, I call them. And then we'll hear from Magaña Farms and Marcia Wagner with Grandview School District and have some time for Q&A. And then both WSDA Farm to School, so my position and the services we provide for farmers, I'm looking to develop and grow, how we're able to support farms to increase sales to schools. And there's also a national training initiative that we're part of, which is kind of why the training portion of this is a little shortened and quick, because next year there will be something better, great, and new that developed nationally around farmer needs, and that's a curriculum and train the trainer that's coming out in the works now. So I didn't want to spend too much time and jump the gun when there's going to be some great new farmer training pieces on how do you sell to schools coming out pretty soon. I had some handouts, but my bag walked off, so you can come find me at the table. A few things that we have developed. There's a Selling to Schools fact sheet from USDA. There's Selling to Schools 101, a nice 5-page handout for farmers that I have at the WSDA Regional Markets booth. Some surveys that we've done on schools and child care centers, like this one's going to be at. What they're interested in buying from local growers, so kind of market information, like if you want to sell to schools, what are some good products to start with? Apples are a fairly good bet. And then, a couple other just tools and templates and fact sheets that exist already that might be helpful if you're getting started or wanting to expand selling to schools. So what is Farm to School? Just to start, education in the classroom and cafeteria on food and nutrition and agriculture. School gardens, so we have hundreds of school gardens in the state. It's a really great movement there of, getting kids' hands in the dirt, pulling food out of the ground and putting it on the lunch line. And then procurement. So we're going to talk mostly about procurement today, which is Washington-grown local foods and school meals, right? So how many here are farmers that have sold to schools already? One? Okay. And Tobias. And how many are farmers who want to start selling to schools? Raise your hand. Okay. Or expand? Yeah. Okay, great. So a lot of great benefits. Why are we talking about Farm to School and putting resources and oomph behind making this work? Because it's challenging for both school districts and for farmers to figure out how to make this work. But there's really good reasons why, right? Students benefit. They eat more fruits and vegetables when Farm to School is happening. They make better and healthier food choices. They improve learning. And the National School Lunch Program is critical food access for thousands of kids across the state, right? So not only is this Farm to School thing, feels great, it's a good story, but it makes a real impact on student health and food access for kids and students across the state. For the school district, when Farm to School is happening, we find that there's an increase in the school lunch participation and school breakfast. Increases learning opportunities, so kids are able to continue learning into the cafeteria, support the local economy, and they get high quality, tasty food, fresh foods. For the farmers, a lot of farmers, we're going to talk about market and sales today, but a lot of farmers are part of this because of that impact on students learning about where their food comes from, right? So being able to be a part of teaching kids. And there's a $17 million spent on Washington-grown products by schools as of the last USDA Farm to School census. And that's only about 9% of school budgets, right? So they could be buying more, and they already buy a lot of Washington-grown foods, some directly and a lot through their distributor, which we'll talk about. And community benefits. So you keep dollars in the local economy, especially for urban and rural areas. That's an important piece, creates jobs, and hopefully we have a little fun along the way. So this is according to WSDA and USDA surveys. Schools want to buy local. So we are seeing that a lot of schools participate in farm to school in some way, and a lot want to start buying directly from farmers like you. If you are buying directly from farms, a lot buy their Washington-grown products through distributors, and a growing number, that 18% and more, are buying from food hubs and cooperatives, because that simplifies a lot of the purchasing process and delivery. Regulations that you need to know, what do farmers need to know? So it turns out there are not specific or unique regulations to schools at the state or federal level for what farmers need to follow in order to sell to a school district. That being said, if you do meat or grain or produce and vegetables, you need to follow the same rules as if you were selling to a restaurant, indirect market, like a grocery store, things like that. So the Handbook for Small and Direct Marketing Farms covers this. So for example, if you're selling meat, that would need to be a USDA processed product. You can't do WSDA custom exempt in order to sell to a school district, right? But just to put out there, like GAP certification is not a standard requirement across the state or federally, but it might be something the school district requires. So there's a lot of things then at the school district level, varies from district to district, what they set and what they want to require of their vendors and suppliers. So there's the baseline is similar requirements. There's nothing specific to schools for farmers to produce and sell directly to schools, but there's many variety of school district requirements that you have to check with your school to find out what they have. Questions on this really quick? And I'm going to keep going through these basics so we can get to hear from Marcia and Tobias. Yeah.
The question is do farmers ever pool their monies to purchase an insurance policy that covers everybody, but it's cheaper than trying to do it alone?
Yeah, I just was researching this with a school and a group of farmers in the state, and yeah, that is a possibility. So I think a group insurance policy, there might need to be some shared marketing and distribution that happens as part of a co-op, but I've heard that's possible.
Another part of that is when a storefront or a school accepts some of my material, what insurances do they have that they're going to prepare it in the right way? They don't want somebody eating raw, I don't know, something that's just not even been washed right.
Yeah, so that's a great transition to knowing your customer. So the rest of this is more going to be about market strategy, right? How do you access the school market? How do you make it work for Marcia and the 90 plus districts in the state that want to buy local or are buying local already? So there are a myriad of rules for food handling, for how you buy product, for what you need to serve that the schools are following from USDA to OSPI to the county health department on down. I'm not going to cover a lot of those, but do you want to just share a little bit of at least food handling? Like who comes to ask what you're doing with food handling?
We have the local health department is required to come and visit at least twice a year. And we're supposed to have a person in charge at each site. That's somebody that knows their food handling. School districts vary a great deal in terms of whether they've got so if they've got 15 schools, they might have a central kitchen and just satellite sites, or they might have full production at all 15 schools. It really depends a lot by school. So your risk then varies based on which model that school follows. Generally speaking, school kitchens are some of the cleanest in the country. So generally speaking, they're a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, that's great. And just to cut to the chase, if you think farms and agriculture is regulated, go talk to Marcia and the school nutrition folks, and they can tell you about regulation and the myriad of things that they have to work through and that we help them work through. But it's all difficult. There's challenges, but that's what we're kind of here to try to overcome. So yeah, knowing your customers, who do you start with? The main decision maker are folks like Marcia and the nutrition director. They might be called a food services director or supervisor. They're making a lot of the contracting and purchasing decisions, developing menus, and getting their staff involved in the production and operations. A few districts in Washington have a food service contractor, so we have a lot of self-operated, which means there's a little more flexibility in decisions made at the district level, but some do work with Chartwells or Sodexo, which are national companies that have their own requirements for vendors or farms, suppliers. I work with some of them too to figure out creative and successful strategies to work together with local farms. And then of course, don't forget, customers are the folks eating the food, parents that are signing their kids up for a school lunch program, the benefits of that. And then lots and lots of regional partners working on this too, from WSU Extension to school garden nonprofits to food and agriculture education, teachers and engaging other parts of the school too. So throughout a few of these, like how did this work slide, I highlighted like why am I telling you this with a little star there. So first and foremost, you'll hear this I think from both Tobias and Marcia, is build those relationships, because there's things like what are the insurance requirements, how do we overcome that, how clean does it need to be when it comes into the kitchen, and all the way down to expect the RFQ for price quotes coming out, and having that communication to figure out what are the products that are going to work well is again just communicating with some of the busiest folks out there in the industry. So finding your customer. So if you want to try to look up your nutrition or food services director, that's something you can do on district websites. It's fairly easy. I was going to try something here if I can get online. Does anyone have a district near you that you are interested in working with or can share one? Grant County. So Grant County. So really, I was just going to Google it for you, because you can Google your district website. You need to look for something like a staff directory, or usually school district has their nutrition services page, which has their main point of contact. So the director at Grant County or Grant School District, or Ephrata School District is another one nearby. Amy Grizel is the nutrition services supervisor there, right? And so you can go to their website, look up their directory, find the lunch menu, what are they serving, and who their main point of contact is. Usually they have the director or nutrition supervisor there. Phone number, email, that's a great place to start. Why do schools want to buy local? Why do they want to make this work? Their number one reason, we know from surveys, is to support the local economy. They want to keep their dollars with you locally and support local farmers. They get quality and fresh product, build community relationships, and knowing where food comes from, both to promote and market that to parents and students and say, we're doing farm to school, farm to table, and also for education, so they can be a part of, teaching about what we grow in Washington and who your farmers are as a part of the nutrition program. So these are things to know as you make that first contact and get in touch with a supervisor, nutrition director. What do you want to offer them? What are you going to be a part of, sharing information about your farm or coming to do taste tests in the cafeteria to be a part of that educational experience and make it a really worthwhile relationship and sales and procurement opportunity. Where does the money come from? What funds do schools use? Anywhere from $32 to $3.41 per meal is what they get from USDA, and that has to cover about half of it goes to labor costs of preparing the food and serving the food, and then what's left over is some of that ingredient cost. So budgets are tight, right? This is for, I was just doing Taste Washington Day, and we had salmon cakes and farro salad, and where else can you get a farm-to-table meal for less than $4, right? So a lot of schools are using really creative, menuing and harvest of the month and features and highlights to at least start out and figure out how to make that budget and pricing issue work. Schools buy their food from distributors, broadliners, produce sellers, Charlie's, Spokane Produce, Duck Delivery, and directly from farms and local producers, and now food hubs and cooperatives that have started up and are helping make that a little easier. If you're not familiar with a food hub, it's anywhere from 6 to multiple dozen farms selling especially to institutions to help make sure you get the volumes that the school might need or the consistency, but still delivered in one order, one delivery. We have a few of those doing great work with schools in the state. So these are their vendors, just to know that your sales and marketing matters too, right? They're hearing from a lot of different folks they work with to buy all kinds of things. So just be aware that sales and marketing to cut through and make sure you're making those connections. That's really important and makes a big difference too. Schools are buying food at various times. They usually have a year-round contract to get that regular, weekly, daily delivery of everything they need, from apples to aprons to equipment. The one-time purchases like Taste Washington Day, seasonal purchases, forward contracts. So working out in ahead, at least have an agreement with a school. We're going into a season where it might be a great time to talk about, I'm going to have 100 X pounds of apples or something else available. Let's see how we can get that into the school. So where it's going to go and they know where it's going to come from. They're usually doing menus Marcia, how often in advance do you set your menus, what you're going to serve?
I have a cycle menu, so I write a 4-week cycle menu that just kind of repeats. I do make seasonal variations to that, but and a lot of times for my menu, especially with breakfast after the bell, I just say fresh fruit.
Then you're flexible to...
And then I'm flexible to use whatever is either seasonal or available.
Yeah. So just to say, some schools are great at flexibility of using what's seasonal. Some, if you're going to show up and say, hey, I'm going to have poulots available next week, why can't you fit that in? They might have already set their order or their menu of what they're going to serve, especially for those center of the plate of the main recipe of the menu item they're serving. Those are often set somewhat in advance. But seasonal purchasing works too. So some opportunities there. Schools buy food, they plan and draft specifications, they send out the solicitation. There's a variety of different techniques they have to use depending on the size of the purchase. But within that, there are ways to prioritize local regardless of how big or small their purchase is. And there's some tools that we work really closely with schools to employ, whether that's specifications, saying we want to know the name of the farm, or we want it within 48 hours of harvest, down to Geographic Preference, which is actually evaluating quotes and being able to pay a higher price for local products in a competitive process. So know that they get specifications from their main distributors. They might be sending out RFQs, so knowing what those look like or what to expect from a request for quotes. And it's a competitive process, right? It's taxpayer dollars, so usually, with the exception of micro purchase, which is a newer opportunity, schools can just buy direct from a farm if it's less than $10,000 of a purchase. The other ones are getting quotes and might be from the distributor or other farms. Product specifications, a few things they might ask for. These are mostly things that we suggest are good opportunities to say this is a way to prioritize a local purchase and give a preference to local. These are a few of the thresholds they have to follow depending on how much they're buying at any time. This is what a request from quotes might look like. So read it, find out how you fit in, if you can meet the requirements, delivery, distribution, et cetera. Another tool that's been used, how much are you going to have, when, what's the price going to be, all those kind of things. And to go back really quick to some of these other, so we talked about gap and insurance, but payment terms, schools might be on net 30. They might have other stipulations around how they pay their vendors to be aware of, how you want to label the product, where you're going to need to deliver it to. Is it going to be one central kitchen or 40 individual schools, right? Going back to request for quotes. So these are just a few examples to say, you might see something like this coming your way. Geographic preference, I get questions from farmers, why can't we spend more? Why can't schools spend more on local products? It turns out they can. It's not the easiest thing, but geographic preference is a way they can develop a policy to say we're willing to pay more for a local product compared to non-local. And we have a whole book on how to do that. Pricing is coming from that budget conversation. How do you figure out a price that works when schools are working with 20 to 30 cents per serving of a fruit and vegetable, for example? And they are usually with a competitive process. Geographic preference is one way that they can pay more, but think about your own pricing, right? If you're usually going to the farmer's market and you can save that 8, 9, 10, 12-hour day to deliver a similar amount of product, how much does that save you on marketing costs? What do you have a surplus of that might be great for the school to get a deal out of potentially that you just want to move? Figuring out those specific crops, I think, is probably a good place to start. What do you grow well in quantity that you think schools might be interested in or able to buy? Another requirement for schools, they have to serve a certain amount of product. So this many fruits, this much vegetable, grains, meat or meat alternate or fluid milk has to be offered every day. So they're rotating through thousands, tens of thousands of meals all across the state with these items. And they have to rotate through different vegetables nowadays. That's a new rule with the new meal pattern requirements that came out in 13-14. So targeting certain crops. These actually mean that schools have to serve different colors and types of vegetables, which are vegetables you probably grow if you grow produce. So that's actually a way the schools are required to follow it, but it's nice that they have to rotate through so you can find your red, your orange, your green, and help supply that. Say, hey, I've got this. This is something I can help you meet your standards. Starting and growing. So Taste Washington Day I mentioned. I think this is a picture of Tobias. Is that you? Maybe. Harvest of the month. So Taste Washington Day is, like I said, a promotion that farmers can sign up for and schools can sign up for to get connected and serve a local menu. Harvest of the month is kind of sometimes the next phase that schools get into is rotating through a local item maybe once per month or once a week. Working with food hubs and distributors. So if you have a distributor, how are they telling schools what is Washington grown, or partnering with other farms through a food hub? Developing products, whether that's, we're going to hear about undersized apples, for example, but what are those other, unbunched kale or getting into fresh cut or processing? Those are prepped items that schools really, really would love to buy locally if they could, because a lot of the food that they get in needs to have some sort of cut, sliced, diced, chopped, bagged, frozen, and that helps with the seasonality too. So undersized, forward contracting. The USDA pilot project for unprocessed fruits and vegetables is a wonky but useful program for buying locally. This is a specific program that about 19 or 20 school districts have set aside money for. If you are GAP certified, is one requirement for it. You have to get approved by USDA. But if you're interested in selling to schools through that and you meet those criteria, I'd love to talk to you, because we are looking to help schools get connected more locally through that specific program. All right, so that was fast. I talk really fast when I want to go through quick, but any questions before I hand it over and hear from some real stories on the ground?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just a question about, you got the per serving price and then the per meal price. Do you have any, and maybe we'll hear this from the panelists, but any sense of where those price points fall for a particular 25-pound box of potatoes or beets or something?
Right. So that translating the poundage into serving size. So those servings, like 20 to 30 cents, or I guess, where are they? These ones, translating, I don't know, Marcia, do you want to answer that or try to? Translating a 25-pound box into a per serving size.
That's a really good question. I don't know that I can really answer that, because the pricing is going to be so different based on school and school size and, who their distributor is. And I mean, there are just so many factors that go into that. I don't know that there's a good answer for that. It also depends on, whether that school, depending on their labor costs, are wanting something that's prepackaged and pre-sliced, or whether they're going to slice it themselves. So there's so many factors there that I don't know that there's really a good answer, direct answer for that. What I can say is generally, for produce, you're looking at anywhere, I'm going to say, between 17 and 30 cents per serving, depending on what it is.
And basically the point here too, so I hear a lot from farmers, like, how do I price my product for this market, especially if I do direct sales or sell to restaurants, and I know I'm not going to get a farmer's market price from schools. 20, 30 cents per serving. I have some tools we can help figure out how to price a box of 25-pound beets based on that, or at least come up with a ballpark, and that does help if there's a RFQ or something that you want to say, I want to sell beets, and that's what Grandview is looking for, then that's kind of the point of having that number out there, is be able to back out how much I could price my beets at to be in that range. So yeah, for beets and every single product like that, there's how much does a per serving, there's calculators to figure out what the serving size is based on poundage and to dice that up in different ways. Yeah, one more question before we move. Was there another one over here?
I was just curious at the end talking about kind of that extra labor piece of whether or not the schools actually want the produce already chopped and everything, because I imagine that is a big piece of, they don't want to go through that extra labor. I totally understand that. So I'm wondering if there's room or conversation for like roles in food hubs or other locations to have that processing happening, and then that being an extra space for more jobs, and if even funding would be available for that.
Yeah, great question. I did a study on this that was looking at how food hubs are trying to fill that infrastructure gap, because there is a big one for schools that want to be able to do that. From our surveys, I think around 70% say they need at least some of their product coming in processed, and it's not capacity that a lot of farms have, especially produce-wise. So how do you get more fresh cut services, frozen, dehydrated, or other products to fill that gap? Because there's a lack of infrastructure for that type of processing that farms can use. So there's some efforts happening with Stevens working on something in Thurston County. Are you talking about that later today or tomorrow? Okay. So I would say there's work being done, but it's emerging. So there are things, whether that's, different parts of the state are looking at how do we fill that gap, because it's definitely a known need for that infrastructure to develop more locally grown processed items. Some grants, there's grants out there too, value-added producer grants or other things to get that infrastructure up and going too. But yeah, it's something that's really, getting worked on.
Just Chris is a good person to just have his email address. So any updated report you can get from him, and when we have material we can share, we'll give it to Chris too. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did across the state with different food hubs in other parts of the state. Last year put out a report called Value Chain Strategies for Processing for the School Market, which basically said, yes, as we suspected, there's not a lot of access for small-scale producers to get their product sliced, diced, chopped into Grandview. And how do we solve that and work together? There's some conventional partners, there's different ways to overcome it, and that's kind of what we were looking at. But now there are some initiatives in different communities to get those type of facilities up and running. Great question though. All right, enough from me for now. I think I want to hand it over to Tobias first. I just put them in order of farm to school, right? So the grower we'll hear from first, and then we'll hear from Marcia. So we'll have some time for questions after this too. But Tobias or Angel, you want to kick us off and share? I have a few questions for them, but they're just going to kind of share their story, and we'll have the time for questions after.
Nomás que hables de cómo empezaste.
Okay, well, this is Tobias. This is my 5 years this year when I started to selling my stuff to the schools, The first year I go to the meetings, Olympia, Mosul Lake, Wenatchee, go quite a few times, Yakima. And then the school, King County District, sent me the all the paperwork, and 16 people coming over to my farm, you know, for Olympia, Sierra, for different areas. And coming all together and see my farm, you know, and then I fill it up, all the paperwork, and I send to, and then the King County School started ordering the stuff for me. Yeah, Wenatchee.
¿Qué escuela te ordenó primero?
The King County, the first one is starting. Yeah.
¿Y qué fruta es la más pedida?
Well, for the fruit, the most popular for the kids is the Asian pears, and the apples, Pink Lady, Fuji's, Galas, and I got cameos. And then I saw a lot of the small cherry tomatoes too, for the school kids, asparagus, and then my plums and apricots. Yeah.
So how did you figure out that those were the right products for the school?
¿Cómo llegaste tú a pensar que eso era como lo más querido para las escuelas?
Well, when I started the Asian pears, the people like, the kids like, and then the Pink Lady is number one too. And then I know, because you know the red delicious, golden delicious, Granny Smith, this guy not like. Yeah. I got President plums too, and I got different varieties and pluots. You know the pluots?
Yeah.
It's crossed too. Plum, and then I got another variety new, it's nectarine and plum.
And how did you figure out the students like those types of apples or the pluots? What did you do to figure that out with the school?
¿Cómo dice?
¿Cómo supiste, por decir, cómo supiste que a los chiquillos le iban a gustar ese tipo de fruta o los tamaños?
Well, you know, I working for the farmer markets for many years.
Right.
And then I order new varieties, the fruit coming, you know, pretty much every year, new good varieties coming. And then I started ordering and try, it was good, and good market. Yeah.
Great. And what kind of advice would you have for farmers?
Or the prices?
What advice?
Okay.
They want to sell to schools, but they don't know how or haven't started. How would you
¿Qué
give them
consejos,
advice on what to do?
¿Qué consejos les darías a otro ranchero que la quiera vender a las escuelas?
Well, my opinion is try selling the good product is the best way. Yeah, because
Quality.
with quality, you know,
Yeah.
is the best way.
Y tener una buena conexión.
Yeah, and good connection and the price too.
So how did you find out the right price?
Yeah, because the schools, well, I don't know around here, over there, this guy speaking the price for the more medium price, because I'm going high price, medium price, small price, something, and I think I go in the medium size.
Yeah. So you found something that worked for your farm.
Yeah.
In the middle.
Oh yeah, and working for the schools too.
Something that benefited both
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah. And how did you build a good relationship with the school? You're meeting them in person, or you talking on the phone,
Como cuando
or
empezaste,
the nutrition director?
como cuando empezaste con Tom, cómo llevaban la relación, cómo hablaban.
Well, I talked on the telephone, you know, and I told, okay, I got this product coming, there's the next one, and there's the next one, and then he, okay, give me some. I'm using this kind of boxes, 25 pounds boxes, and okay, give me 200 boxes. And then I put in the pallet and the cooler, and then I deliver to the school.
Right.
Yeah.
Works. You started doing dried apples. Do you think that's something schools would like also?
Well, I don't know. I give it sample, for the server people,
Right.
And this is pretty good. This is my first year. Why buying last year the dehydrator and building the building, and this year I getting the license and I sell a lot to the farmer market too.
Yeah. So you started giving some samples for the dried fruit to some of the schools that they buy your fresh fruit.
Yeah, in case later the school wants some, it's fine.
Marcia, Wagner from Grandview School District.
Well, I've been in food service for more years than I really care to discuss, but I deviated for a while and worked in WIC for 7 years. So I had a lot of experience working with small children and in Grandview. So I became very aware of the nutritional gaps and, the needs of the kids. And I would see them snacking on Cheetos and Mountain Dew and, this kind of stuff. And I knew that as a community, we could do better. And in reaching out to the school food director at the time, their approach was, what they ate in high school and what they knew the kids liked, which was not at the time nutritionally very healthy, right? When the opportunity came to get into school food service, I felt like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to be able to impact the lives of thousands of kids instead of a few hundred. And so I was very interested in farm to school and providing healthier meals, scratch cooking, that kind of thing. Well, I'm going to admit that I was very naive because the learning curve was extremely steep. And the first year that I was at the school district, in changing the menu and I got input and that kind of thing, what I heard from parents was, you're putting vegetables in everything. And, well, my child won't eat that. I'm getting tired of bringing them food to school. So in other words, they'd get to school, they wouldn't like the lunch instead of looking ahead of time to see what was for lunch. So then instead of saying, you're going to eat what you're offered, which is, I'm dating myself, but that's back in the day, you ate what was offered to you or, you didn't eat. A lot of parents today are letting the kids decide what they're going to eat. So it was really kind of a quandary. I was very surprised by that. In addition, Chris referred to the purchasing guidelines, and any school that receives federal dollars, which is any public school, we receive 2 audits a year. So we have the attorney, not the attorney, the auditor general, the state auditor. We have the state auditor come, and then we have OSPI come, and they tear through our books. So anything that I purchase, I have to have either an RFP through, and that has to meet certain guidelines. So if, I put a request for quote or a request for bid out in the paper, and you respond, if your request does not meet all of the guidelines, we can't even consider it. It goes in this pile and is not even looked at. So it's got to, you have to know if you're going to do business with a school, how to do a professional quote. And you've got to make sure that you tick off all of the things that are in the requirements. So that was interesting. If I go, and I've purchased from local farms for a couple of different things, and I get numerous phone calls every year for, I've got X number of cases of pink ladies available, can you buy them? Some things that are really important is have a professional name for your farm. If Joe Smith calls me and says, I've got, X number of pounds of carrots, and I say, okay, well, what's your business name? I don't know. Well, I guess it's just Joe Smith. if I write a check to Joe Smith for $10,000, that's going to catch the auditor's eye. So professional business name is pretty important. The other thing that school districts are very keenly aware of is liability. And that's going to be one of the things my boss is going to say immediately is, you know, are they insured? You know, do we know where it came from? How do we know they didn't pick the apples up off the ground? You know, that kind of thing. One of the farms that I purchased from, in terms of why to buy from you all, I can tell you I can save a lot of money buying direct. To give you an example, we've done the Apple Crunch now, I believe, 4 years in a row. And as Chris mentioned, it's the biggest one in the state, which I was surprised by, but we involve all of the schools. So if I need a product for that, I needed 4,000 apples. When I did this with a local farm directly, they were able to provide me the 4,000 apples, and I believe I paid in the neighborhood of $250, $300 for those 4,000 apples. When I did it this year, and I did it through the distributor, I paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,400. Okay? So there's a lot of room in the middle, okay? And the farmer that I did it with, you know, where they sent it in the big wooden bins that sat out behind my kitchen for months before I could get them to come pick them back up. And we had quite a discussion about boxes and packaging, because these boxes are expensive to you guys. Well, you can see that I had room to pay for boxes and still save money. Does that make sense? Okay. So anyway, they wanted their boxes back, so they were willing to give me boxes that I had to put together that I could package the apples so I could take them to my schools. Well, that was a labor expense, and then they got rained on, so then I had boxes laid everywhere trying to dry them out. So I would have much rather just paid for the boxes. So some of those things are things that you have to think about, is packaging, how am I going to receive them? And labor certainly is a huge, huge piece right now. Most schools, you've probably seen, you know, because of the McCleary decision, there was this idea out there that there was all of this money for labor, and so you had the teachers union, you had the Public Service Employees Union, all kind of going after those dollars. So that happened, and then this year we had SEB, which is a School Employees Benefit Board, so that's changed. The state's now in charge of health care for all of us. That was a huge increase to school districts as well. So labor is a huge expense, huge expense. So if I can buy prepackaged dehydrated apples, the kids, one, love them. They're individually packaged, so I can put these in my breakfast after the bell program. I can put them in sack lunches. I can do all kinds of things with them. Breakfast after the bell is another thing that happened this year, which has been amazing. My district happens to be CEP, which means we're operating under the community eligibility provision. So none of the students in my district pay for breakfast or lunch. We went to a breakfast in the classroom model, so where I had 100 to 200 kids per school eating, now I have at my elementary schools, I have about 450 to 500 per school eating. And at my middle and high school, where I had 150 to 200 students eating, I now have 750 to 800 students per school eating. So it's been huge. But breakfast in classroom means that it needs to either be fresh, naturally individually packaged, or it needs to be individually packaged in order to go into those bags. One of the things that I had talked to Tobias about, you know, before we came in today was it would be really helpful to school districts to have a food hub. I don't know of any school districts that don't want to buy direct, that wouldn't benefit from buying direct, but we don't know where all the farms are. There's no place that I can Google farms and know that, because it's going to pull up every farm everywhere. It makes it difficult for us to search. Plus, if I've got my cycle menu, I need a whole bunch of different produce. That means either reaching out to lots of different farms. That means me trying to manage where I'm going to get my lettuce from, where I'm going to get my tomatoes from, where I'm going to get my apples this month, whether or not there's peaches available locally. And that's difficult. So that takes up a lot of time that, quite frankly, none of us have. Where if there was a hub locally and there was somebody that had a distribution system already set up, and that could be the hub, they could keep your certifications, your licenses, your liability insurance. It would answer your question about the liability insurance. If you're part of that hub, then, you know, there could be a joint purchase on an insurance policy. It would be kind of a one-stop shop. And then I could go, that, you know, then that hub then could respond to a request for quote, and then I would have a one-stop shop. I wouldn't have to worry about contacting you for lettuce this month, and you for apples this month, and you for carrots, and, okay, then I can make a produce order and know that my needs are taken care of, and that I've done good things for the economy, it's fresher, et cetera. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. That would make it much easier for me to purchase those. I started out small. I did the Apple Crunch. It was a huge hit. Our middle school actually has all the kids go outside and they fly a drone over and take a picture of the kids all eating their apples at the same time. So they actually have a lot of fun. Yeah, you can see, they actually have a lot of fun doing that. So, and it's been a good way for us to promote Washington agriculture.
Awesome. So I want to say thanks to both Marcia.
I've been an organic grower for 40 years, and every time I ever brought up bringing organics into a school, they said, well, have you done all these tests on pathogens? Yeah. I have a master's degree in entomology. Pathology is like one of my favorite subjects. So I do my due diligence with everything that I grow, and it costs more. So for me, first of all, it's got to be organic. And secondly, I want to stand behind my products with pathology, with any concerns about health of what I'm selling to, especially to kids. But like my long-range goal is kids are great, but I'd sure like to be selling into hospitals and institutions. But a lot of places, those people, they eat cardboard. And that's a horrible thing to do to people that are in institutions. So I'm trying to get a feeling for what the, especially the school community feels about organics.
You know, I can't speak for all schools. There is still a pretty wide range of what organic means. I don't think we've done a great job of defining what's really organic. It's just like a free-range chicken. You know, people think free-range chickens are wandering around out in the field. And although some of them are wandering around out in the field, a lot of them aren't, and they're still called organic. So I think there's some, amongst school professionals, I think there's some skepticism about, is it really organic? What does organic really mean? So I think there's that piece of it. In terms of the pathogen reports, I know I would never ask for a pathogen report necessarily. What I'm going to be more concerned about is the safe agricultural practices, making sure that, you know, I don't know that I would require GAP certification, but I think most people want to do what is right and to serve healthy foods to kids. But unfortunately, we're in a very litigious society, and we are at schools have to be very, very conscious of our liability. The other thing I think when you hear the term organic, you think expensive. Not that that's necessarily the case, but I think that's what happens. People immediately, they hear organic and they think the cost just went up. Kind of like at a restaurant, when the lights go down, the prices go up. So.
Tobias, how do you talk to food service directors about production, your practices or food safety?
¿Cómo contactas a las escuelas de tus frutas como saludable? ¿De qué prácticas usas?
¿Cómo podemos?
¿Cómo qué prácticas usas como para darles algo saludable a los estudiantes, aunque no eres certificado orgánico?
Okay, well, and organic, I know it's way expensive. I mean, I try do something right, you know.
¿Cómo usas pesticidas limitadas?
Yeah, the pesticides. I mean, the no really strong now. You know before what is calling the very strong spray long time back. You know. You remember where is it? Yeah. This is making me sick when I driving around to the field. I'm kind of sick. And now, you know, the another chemicals is lot of way down than the other ones, you know. And it's not very strong. The good time before, you remember, you need to wait 48 hours for go to the field. Now for the new chemicals, you can go on the 24.
If you believe them.
Only the cost is more too.
Other
Yeah.
questions? Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to add to that. I've worked with a local community. I'm from North Idaho. And something that we kind of talk about is a lot of us in the room kind of drink the same Kool-Aid. We're all in a consensus that fruits and vegetables are good for you. But the people that aren't in this room or here, like, don't necessarily identify with that. And so at the school level, I think while we're on a mission to educate on nutrition, we have to weigh what's important. I love organics. I'm a believer in organics. I've sold organics as a distributor, so I'm not naysaying that. But there's this spectrum of education out there beyond our walls that we have to remember. Do we want our kids eating Doritos, or do we want them eating an apple? And what is our battle going to be of eating that Dorito versus the apple, and then transitioning into educating them on what's your better option of the apple? And so I acknowledged that through some of the outreach that our community was doing and understanding food systems and what's important. And there's just a lot of people that don't understand even where food comes from. And so we have to tackle that first before we can start making or asking people to believe in organics and the health of that, I guess.
And, I would agree with that. I live in a severe need district, so we're a poor community. And even though there's this, I already mentioned this broad variety of fresh produce that is in and around our community, I find it surprising that that isn't necessarily consumed in our community. I was looking at our population sign the other day, and it kind of dawned on me that we're in a community of close to 11,000, and we have 3,700 students. So if there's 3,700 students, and each one of those students has 2 parents, right? We touch most of our community every day. And that was kind of an aha moment for me this year. I also had gone through the grocery store, and we've done the fresh fruit and vegetable program for many years. And every year I try to put some unusual items out there. So in terms of speaking to the impact that schools can have on the intake of things, we did jackfruit one year. I had never seen jackfruit I'd never seen a jackfruit, I'll be honest with you. Then all of a sudden I noticed that after we had it on the fresh fruit and vegetable program, now our local grocery store has jackfruit all the time. Similar things with other varieties. So, I know that we have an impact. I would agree. I was surprised to see the jackfruit because we're in a poor community and it's fairly expensive. I mean, the thing is enormous and, kind of expensive, but nevertheless, there they are. I think, again, it's the perception of the cost. And as I mentioned before, if I were to get organic through a distributor, I'm going to pay a lot of money for it. If I can get a similar product and go through a local food hub or a local farmer, right? When I mentioned the cost difference just in an apple, there is a lot of room and opportunity for that, but I think it's a matter of educating the nutrition service professionals that are purchasing also. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's great. Yeah. Any other questions before we move to kind of the last 15 minutes?
I was wondering if, as a farmer, Tobias, if you feel like, I don't know, people know you or you feel seen more. I feel like a lot of farmers that I am related to or live with, they feel like they don't know their customer base anymore, and it really hurts them. So I was kind of wondering, if you see kind of your role as a community now that you're providing food to schools, how that kind of shaped your perception and stuff.
¿Cómo ha cambiado cómo la gente te mira de que eres ranchero y que vendes la fruta a las escuelas? ¿Cómo te hace sentir o cómo te sientes de hacer algo bien para la comunidad?
Well, I'm feeling good, for selling to the school kids. This is my best heart, the kids I know like all my products, my fruit and everything. Yeah, I sell into the schools, the sweet peppers too. Yeah.
Yeah, so not only is it that we sell just fruits to the schools, as little kids only like fruits and they hardly eat vegetables, but in some cases we have sold peppers to some school districts, cherry tomatoes. So they're transitioning to trying out different things now.
Yeah, I would say definitely there's a marketing bump, and we know that from other studies and evidence too of farmers, especially if Magaña Farms is on the menu. That goes home to parents too. They can know who their farmer is through the school lunch program, and I think there's some really good tangible benefits for that too. Yeah.
I think there's also a lot of opportunity. I agree with you. I think a lot of farmers are invisible. I think a lot of nutrition services people are invisible. I had somebody come to work as a sub. She'd been in banking for years. And she's like, I had no idea that all this work went into this. I just thought the food came hot and ready. I think there's a lot of opportunity, particularly if there was a food hub, because then we'd have one source to contact to say, hey, I'd really like to have a farmer come and do a visit this month. Can you find somebody for me? Then that person then could kind of go through their Rolodex of local farmers and call and say, hey, Tobias, you willing to go to Grandview and, visit the kids at the middle school next Tuesday or whatever. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement in that. And I think the more kids can see where their food has come from and that it's come locally, and that I think that is only a good thing.
So what's next, basically, and how can WSDA help? That's what I want to cover here with the last just 15 minutes. So there's a farm-to-school producer training project that National Farm-to-School Network and the NCAT and USDA are working on that we're a part of, just helping producers like you build your capacity and get into more schools. And so locally at the state level, but federally this is happening nationwide too. The project partners include a few folks here, including me down here with a great advisory council of super awesome partners across the country. So this is exciting. It's coming. They're doing a needs assessment right now. We're developing the curriculum. There'll be a train the trainer regionally. I hope one happens in Washington. So if you're a service provider too and are interested in this, providing a train the trainer or providing a training on farm to school sales for producers in the future, there'll be some train the trainers coming. And then providing potentially at TILT next year, we'll see, to roll out this training that will be even better version of kind of what I ran through, in the first 20, 30 minutes. So yeah, participate, get involved. Let me know if you're interested in that initiative. And yeah, I guess before I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so we'll try to just cut this kind of short, but I am interested in hearing from folks if you want to stick around and talk about what WSDA Farm to School can do. Obviously, we heard a lot about the information gap, the processing too, but information, what schools want to buy local, what farms are available for school districts to buy from. I think that's something we can help with. So both that training piece and then what kind of programming WSDA is providing would be great to get some feedback on. And these are a few of those questions. Just what would help you start or expand your school sales? Does anybody have initial thoughts on what you've heard today or what you work on to try to reach schools that would be useful?
The school district that I went to is also 100% free lunch. It was 100% free lunch. And when I talked, because I did food security and stuff, but when I talked to them, they said that they didn't have the budget to buy local. And so it kind of shocked me. I was wondering, all of our food that we get at my school is all prepackaged in plastic, and I was wondering what your process was of changing that or going around that, or.
Well, prior to my starting in Grandview, a lot of the food was prepackaged. It came prepackaged, went in the oven prepackaged, got served prepackaged. We've gone away from that quite a bit. That I want to address first the budget thing. So we have a pot of money, okay? So I don't really understand that we don't have budget to buy locally unless they have a prime vendor contract. With a prime vendor contract, they would be locked into buying X percent, depending on the contract, from that vendor. So that might have been what they were talking about. I'm not really sure. They also just may not understand the benefits and how much money they could save by buying locally, if that makes sense. It is a lot of work to buy locally right now. So it may also have been their way of saying it's a great idea, but.
There's the ingredient product cost, but there's the cost of staff time that goes into prep, into capacity. So actually have a slide on.
And the purchasing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, just for me purchasing, if I can get it from here and I know that everything's covered, that's way easier and a lot less time than for me to go through a Rolodex and see who's selling apples right now or peaches in season and who has those. And does that make sense? Or I've had people call and say, hey, I have, 60 bins of, pink ladies that I really need to move. Because that means I still have to get the application through my business office. I have to make sure they have liability insurance. I have all these things I have to check off that, you have to prioritize. And a lot of times those don't make the top of the list.
I come with the data and the studies because that's what I'm around to help track too. And there is a new study that just came out kind of backing up exactly what Marcia said, that schools are more likely to save money and costs when they buy both from distributors and from direct farms, which makes sense because then you have even more options and competition and figuring out who has the best price, right? And some of that flexibility of that's when it is being purchased direct, surpluses or figuring out the price that works for the farm. The distributor markup isn't there. There's good reasons for that, and that's backed up by a study that just came out too. Great. Well, I think we'll rack up there. I'm here the rest of the day today. I'm happy to talk with folks about anything farm to school related, or with regional markets and the work we do at WSDA too. So thanks again. Thanks for rolling with the timing, and fill out your evaluations, please, the pink sheets, before you go. Thanks a lot.